As someone who has called France home since 2012, I've had loads of time over the years to reflect on my life here and the life I left behind in the US. Now, today, I'm going to get right into 11 things I miss the most from the US after a decade of living in France, and I have a lot to say on this topic, so let's go. Bonjour tout le monde, welcome back to We in France. I'm Diane, thank you for being here, and it goes without saying that when you grow up in one place and you become accustomed to how things are done and what you find there, it's only normal to miss certain things when you leave and you go somewhere else. I strangely never experienced intense homesickness after moving to France, but there are definitely things that I miss about life in the United States. So with that, we're going to get right into it with number one, amazing pizza and Mexican food. Now, fellow New Yorkers out there, I know you feel me on this. The food scene from my favorite city in the world is something I majorly miss. New York City has some of the best pizza in the world, I'd arguably say, and I was spoiled by it, 100%. I could just pop out of my apartment in the financial district, grab a slice of pizza whenever I wanted, and Mexican food was another favorite of mine, authentic Mexican food. Now, in France, you'll definitely find pizza, you'll find Mexican-ish food, but it's definitely not the same, especially living in a smaller town with fewer options. All right, number two, grocery stores like Sprouts, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and that sort of thing. I've been going to Whole Foods and Trader Joe's for years. Sprouts, though, was new to me as of 2021, and I love that place. They opened up a store near where my dad lives in Florida, and the produce selection is unmatched. I find the overall quality of the store, it's really top notch, and I really can't get enough of their waffles. They sure beat Eggo's, the Sprouts brand. If you know, you know. And I just regularly visit when I'm in the US. I love Sprouts and stores like that. The three I just mentioned, I feel like they're a pleasure to shop in, and as someone who loves grocery shopping, I really look forward to these things when I go back and visit family in the US. Now, France absolutely has a bunch of amazing supermarket chains. You've seen them here on my channel. I've done supermarket tours and some of my favorite souvenirs and that sort of thing. I'll link one of those videos above somewhere. I'm not knocking French grocery stores at all. And there are absolutely health food stores too here in France. Biocup, Naturalia, for example. But they don't have the same selection as the three American ones I mentioned above, and they tend to be pretty expensive. And they're not a stand-in for Sprouts, Whole Foods, or Trader Joe's in any sense of the word in terms of size, selection, hours. Yeah, so I miss those stores. All right, number three, a can-do attitude. Now, say what you want about Americans, but one undeniable truth about us is that generally speaking, American society has a can-do attitude. It's kind of laced with this pleasant optimism that's really not seen in France in the same way. I'm talking about things from customer service policies that make returns free and easy for the customer to people's general demeanor and even how business is conducted. There's this friendly and often enthusiastic attitude in the US that I miss. Some people might say this is superficial, but I don't think that's always the case. And of course, I'm not saying that you won't find French people like this. You will, but I'm speaking overall, it's kind of a vibe you get. And listen, I am not an over-the-top, smiley Pollyanna who's always excited. Like, that is not me. I hate toxic positivity. If you don't know what it is, give it a Google. But the American spirit is something I miss. And I know that if you live in France, probably other areas too, you know what I mean. And I have observed in France over the years, people tend to be a little more cautious and critical. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a difference. And even the French language has this negative slant at times. For example, when you want to say something is pretty good, you would actually say pas mal, literally not bad, which means you actually do like it. And the French are known to complain a lot. It's just, it's a different vibe. All right, number four, affordable electronics. They're definitely something I miss from the US. And if you bought anything in France, you know that electronics here tend to cost a bit more, especially when the exchange rate is not in our favor. So things like smartphones, TVs, appliances, none of these things are cheap. And whenever possible, I wait for the twice yearly sales, les soldes, in France. And for small items, I tend to buy them on sale if I'm in the US around the holidays. I like saving money. What can I say? Okay, number five, screened windows. Just the other day, true story, I almost got clocked in the head when a neighbor's kid threw a toy out the window right as I was passing by, like outside the window on the sidewalk outdoors. And in France, and of course many other places in Europe and elsewhere, windows don't have screens. So toys, plants, cats, babies. They could all fall out of a window and onto your head if you're not careful. Safety and jokes aside, there's an even bigger reason why I miss window screens here in France, and it's because of the bugs. I am super sensitive to mosquito bites, just pesky things that bite. They're always buzzing around my head when I want to sleep, waiting to pounce right as I'm drifting off to sleep. And, we have a mosquito net that goes around our bed, but it's not foolproof. They always seem to get in. And we've even gotten giant spiders, like the size of my palm, something I'd never seen in the US, that kind of like waltz on in, making our walls their favorite hangout because they come right in through the windows. And I've been bitten by spiders and ended up on antibiotics several times when the bites have gotten infected. That's all to say I hate bugs, and I wish there was an easy way to install window screens. French windows and ours, there are other types of French windows, but our windows open vertically with the handle. You don't push them up. And the DIY solutions that have become a little more popular over the years at hardware stores, they don't make a perfectly sealed off window. So even if they did, you would still need to reach through the window to open and close the shutters, which is something that you do every morning and night. Trust me, we've tried it all, but there's no easy way. So we deal with it. All right, 6, central air conditioning. Now, luckily, my area of France does not get uncomfortably hot, except for like a week or two during the summer. We're not in the south of France. And this heat that I'm talking about. It's like where you sweat if you're just like standing there and God forbid you want to work out or actually do some housekeeping and move around the house. You will just sweat, and when you have to sleep, when you're sweating your butt off, like it's impossible to sleep. So I held out for as long as I could before getting a portable AC unit for the bedroom. But I would be lying if I said there weren't nights that I spent dreaming of central AC in a nice cool bedroom. That's no longer a problem. I think this year we actually only put on the AC 3 or 4 nights. So yeah, it's not the hugest deal. But people joke that the French are afraid of air conditioning. I have a blog post over on my site about that. And while that's mostly a joke, it is true that AC is not as mainstream in France as it is in the US. Now, in most places, it is not needed for the vast majority of the year, like it would be in, say, South Florida. Houses are not built with central AC. My house was built in the 50s. We don't have that. And people rely less on air conditioning, and they use their shutters, les boulets, to keep their homes cool. Number 7, the Jersey Shore. No, not the TV show, The Place. And anyone who doesn't agree that New Jersey is beautiful, well, they haven't spent enough time there. Now, my home state, I love it, but it's something I didn't fully appreciate until I was well into adulthood. Probably not until my early to mid-20s. I grew up in Somerset County. It is full of beautiful nature. The trees in the fall were always stunning. And my summers were spent in Monmouth County on the beach. Being near the ocean, it's always felt calming and restorative. And I cherish my childhood memories being on the New Jersey coast at the Jersey Shore. And I think it's part of why I'm drawn to Brittany here in France, La Bretagne, because it reminds me of home in a way. And, this one holds a lot of sentimental value for me, and I take every chance I can to visit my home state, which admittedly is not very frequently these days because my family now lives in Florida. All right, number 8, Target. Now, if you've been to Target, you know it's a wonderful place. It's a one-stop shop for pretty much anything you could possibly need: electronics, food, books, personal care items, whatever it is. And if you have a super Target nearby, that one's like supercharged, it's even better. Now, there's no exact French equivalent of Target. Of course, yeah, there are hypermarché, hypermarkets, that have a bunch of things. But there's something special about the Target experience that's not really replicated in France. So yeah, I miss that place. All right, number 9, ice in drinks. Now, it's no secret that drinks chock full of ice are not the norm in France. Ice exists, yes, and you could certainly ask for it. It's not rude, but most of the time drinks are served with very little, if any, ice, which stands in sharp contrast to how things are done in the US, where you basically get a glass of ice in water. That's overboard. But I went to the movies here in France a couple of weeks ago, and I asked if my iced tea fountain drink would be served with ice. And the woman told me, no, they don't have ice. And I was like, oh man, bummer. So I passed on the drink. I feel like fountain drinks, if you get a soda and iced tea, they taste better with ice when they come from the machine. But as I said, I don't want a cup full of ice, but I think a few ice cubes, they're never a bad thing in my book. And in hot climates, absolutely, when I visit family in Florida, I feel like the ice is much appreciated. In France, it's nice to have. It's not needed because it's not quite as hot most of the time, but I like ice. Number 10, large parking spaces and parking garages that do not make you feel claustrophobic. Now, Even though I've lived in France a pretty long time now and we have a small-ish car, I'm still not used to the very small, narrow, and low-ceiling parking garages that are commonly found in France. I've definitely gotten used to the narrow parking spaces in general, but the garages, oh man, I still kind of like cringe when I'm the passenger. I'm really happy that my husband Tom does the driving. And whenever I'm in a parking garage, I always wonder what people with big cars do. Like they must be the most chill drivers ever, or just not care if they have scratches all over their car. Because, while most people in France have smaller cars than we do in the US on average, you can absolutely buy a huge sedan here or a big SUV, even if they aren't the norm for most people. And even with the small car, you still have to pay attention so you don't like clip your bumper or your mirror on something, or like when you're turning into the space, like you literally might have like 3 or 4 inches. So yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking. But yeah, cars are overall, they're smaller in France, so it makes sense that roads and parking spaces and garages are smaller too. There's just less space here, and you'll see all kinds of paint marks and scrapes on the garage posts and garage walls. So like not everyone is able to navigate these garages with ease, for the record. All right, number 11, friends and family. I've saved the most important one for last. Friends and family are hands down across the board who I miss the most, more than any of the other 10 previous things I just mentioned combined, and then some. And FaceTime has been a lifeline. I don't think if I moved to France in 1990 or something, or like 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, I don't think I could have done it, because before technology existed, like video calls and WhatsApp and all that, I think the distance probably would have killed me. But seeing someone on video, it's better than nothing. It's of course not the same as giving them a big hug in person and seeing them face to face, but it's definitely something, and I am so grateful we live in an age where that type of technology is possible. At some points throughout the years here, life's distracted me, but at other times, you really find yourself yearning for friends and family, and they've been on my mind. Thinking back, I think the most difficult time for me in France was during the pandemic, when the restrictions made it impossible for me to leave France, which of course was the time I needed to leave France the most. If you've been following me a while, that was when my mom was dying of cancer, and I desperately needed to be there for family, but legally I couldn't be. But eventually, and in time, I was able to get out of France. I was able to be by my mom's side, be with my family. But after experiencing several additional losses in that time frame, I've really felt that pull from friends and family even more. And it's not them guilting me at all. I'm really lucky to have chill family. I don't feel guilt ever being imposed on me. But it's more of an internal conversation I have with myself. My family, friends, they accept the fact that I live abroad. And the pull is more from the distance and just how hard it is to be away as circumstances change. You see loved ones get married or have kids, and then you see the kids get older on video, and you miss parties and events like weddings and just all that stuff. And you think about what your life might have been like if you never left. And it goes both ways, right? And I feel like this feeling is definitely intensified over the years, and that's something we just have to manage if we live abroad. And I feel like what helps mitigate this for me is to visit as often as I can. And something I want to share with you is how the French convey the sentiment of missing someone. It's actually pretty neat. So just stick with me. This might be a little confusing if you don't speak French at all, but stick with me. The sentence, I miss you, is formed in a way that's the exact opposite of what you might expect. In French, to say I miss you is tu me manques. The French sentence literally translates to you are missing from me. So the subject is not I, but instead the thing or the person that you're missing. Likewise, you miss me is actually je te manque. Like literally it looks like I miss you, but it means the opposite. And I think it's really touching, like in a way, just how the French express that idea of missing someone or something. It's not that we miss something. It's not us. We're not the subject. It's that something is missing from us, as if these things make us whole in a way, and that not having them leaves us lacking in some way. That hits deep. I really like that. I try to keep my intros short these days, but I do want to give you some context for my list. So thank you for making it this far. I just want to be clear that, make no mistake, France has everything you need to live a great life. So most of the things I mentioned, they don't factor into my daily thoughts. They're not huge deals. But when I go back to the US and come across one of the things I mentioned, I rediscover how much I actually do miss having them in my everyday life in France. But nothing I mentioned is a matter of life and death. They're not that serious, except the last one, number 11. But none of these things keep me from getting out of bed in the morning or really weighs on me, except what I just said, the friends and family. But there are definitely aspects of my old American life that I really did enjoy, and I look forward to when I go back to visit. A lot of what I talked about has that sentimental value, and I didn't move to France till I was in my 20s, so the things that I grew up with are comforting, like a warm blanket on a cold night. They're familiar, they're easy, and they represent a little piece of me and where I come from. And let me tell you, in the early days of France, some of the things I missed reminded me every single time that I was like a fish out of water here. But yeah, the things I mentioned, they're not necessarily these like amazing, spectacular things, but they represented comfort and ease. I think it's also important to point out that just because I miss things from the US, it doesn't mean that I want to move back. You can enjoy your life in France while also acknowledging that there are things from your home country that you miss. Two things can exist and both be true. And I also acknowledge there is privilege that's inherent in the fact that I've been able to move to France by choice, to experience life here, and to be able to visit family. So I don't want to skip over that by any means. It also doesn't mean that just because I miss things from the US that I should go back to the US. Things are different in France, but doesn't mean that the things that I dislike them so much to actually pick up and leave. And if that ever becomes the case, then I'll explore other options. But for now, we're good. And I always say this, not everything in France is perfect, of course, nor is it in the US or anywhere else. But yeah, just to reiterate, if you're new here, I didn't leave the US because of politics or to go to university or because I was like fed up with life there or anything like that. I moved to France to be with my French husband, Tom, and I have no plans to move back to the US. The bottom line is that living abroad, it gives you this like new lens that allows you to view your home country with a different set of eyes, a more critical set of eyes. And it's a perspective I never would have gotten if I had stayed in the US. So I will always be grateful for that. And living abroad in France is definitely not easy, but it's been worth it, 100%. I don't live with regret. Also, before I close this one out, I want to reiterate that I am sharing my personal thoughts based on my own lived experience as someone from the fine state of New Jersey living in the Loire Valley in France. I am by no means saying that these things I mentioned should come to France or be more like the US or any other country, or that life here is inherently better or worse than somewhere else. I'm not saying that at all. When you move somewhere new, you definitely see how things are done and then you adapt. And I certainly have adapted. I don't like every single thing about France, but I accept them and I respect how things are here. And it's okay to miss things from another life. It's really kind of funny what you miss when you're away for a while. Thank you for listening, everyone. I'm going to leave it there for today. If you live abroad, tell me below in the comments about some of the things you miss from your home country. I appreciate you being here as always, and I'll see you back on We in France soon. Salut!